I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
2020 has just begun, but already there are some weighty issues for local government and tribal nations to consider. We'll tell you more.
As we turn the calendar to a new year, a look back at the economic news of note from last year, and we will see what our experts expect for the start of a new decade.
And we'll have the week's top business headlines from the editors at Business North.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. And Julie, this is our first live show of 2020. It's kind of exciting to kick off a whole new decade of Almanac North.
It's really funny to see how fast the decades go.
First
it was just the years, now the decades fly by.
They're going as quickly as a year, that's for sure. And we begin this week with video from some of the week's top stories.
All right. Thank you, Denny. The unlikely issue of refugee resettlement dominated this week's St. Louis County Board meeting in Duluth. An overflow crowd packed the county board chambers to speak on the refugee issue. The board had scheduled a yes or no vote on giving consent for refugee resettlement in the county. The vote was in response to an executive order issued by President Trump. Under the president's order, state and local governments have until June 1st of this year to provide written consent to receive refugees. After 3 hours of passionate public testimony, the board voted to table the matter until May 26th, just days before the executive order takes effect. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz issued state consent in December, but individual counties can make their own decisions on the refugee issue. Also this week, the Beltrami County Board in north central Minnesota became the first in the state to refuse refugee resettlement.
A Native American cemetery disturbed by a state highway project back in 2017 is one step closer to restoration. The Minnesota Department of Transportation halted construction of Highway 23 in Duluth's Fond du Lac neighborhood nearly 3 years ago, when construction unearthed human remains. Since then, the state has been working with the tribe to make amends and preserve the burial grounds. The latest step happened on Wednesday when people gathered at the Black Bear Casino in a public meeting to look at proposed plans for restoring the cemetery and honoring those buried there. 3 proposals were presented Wednesday, with the Fond du Lac Reservation Business Committee having the final say in the matter.
I'm interested in some closure for our ancestors there at the funeral or at the cemetery, and apparently there's a wave of people in our community that believe that we should just leave it alone and let it go back to where it was. With all the settlement and all the houses and roads and traffic that go through that area, it'll never be the way it was. It'll never be that way. And so what we need to do is to ensure that it's protected. And the state has been good about stopping the project, about working with our community, working with our people, working with the local community down there to try to come up with a solution to a problem that they created unwittingly. They're looking at the concepts again tonight, and they're making more comments on it, and they're going to bring it back in a couple of weeks through the council with some recommendations for us as to how to finally close up the cemetery, put the markers there, and do the protection of the traditional cemetery that was there.
It's within this context of all these incredible historic sites.
For more than 20 years, we've been inviting economic experts to our show for the start of a new year. We bring them back again to review significant economic events from the past year and make predictions for the economy in the new year. And based on the beginning of 2020, it could be a wild ride. So joining us now is Tony Barrett. Tony, of course, senior member of our panel and professor emeritus with the College of St. Scholastica. Ron Brochu is editor and publisher of Business North, and Saqib Mahmood is associate professor of sustainable management and economics at UW-Superior. Welcome back. Good to have all three of you back on the panel again. Let's do it one more time. Tony, the Dow keeps reaching record highs. What in the world is driving the Dow?
Well, you're going to steal one of my predictions.
Okay.
I think the stock market has gotten a little ahead of the economy. The economy's in its 10th year of growth. It's our best expansion in history, but we're not growing that fast. Corporate earnings aren't growing that fast, and yet the market is growing very fast. 2020, I see at least one correction, maybe more. It's just, optimism, but we'll see.
If this continues, is this helping President Trump?
Yeah, without a doubt. The U.S. economy is going to continue growing in 2020, just like in 2019. Historically, a good economy means re-election.
Ron, are you surprised at how the stock market continues roaring given the impeachment hearings and the conflicts in the Middle East right now?
Not really, because there's, it's about the only place to make any money. Equities. You can't make money on savings accounts and or bonds. It's just the place to be right now.
Saqib, is Northwest Wisconsin benefiting from all this?
Right now in the Northwest Wisconsin, if we look at the unemployment rate, it is around 4.2%. If we look at the last year, I'm talking about Northwest Wisconsin
Sure.
and actually Northeast Minnesota together. They're a reef region, the 15 counties that we cover. So it is a bit of like higher than the national average, and the labor force participation rate is 61%. We are having a bit seeing what we are seeing is a bit of like an anomaly here, given that what is happening around the country. Like for job openings, what we are seeing now is 0.9 job applicants. So it is a bit of like a change if we look at back like 15 years ago, or it was almost like more than 10, like 11 individuals applying for the one job opening, but now it is 0.9. So you can see that bit of like a change over there. Yeah.
Saqib, can you put maybe a little bit of meat on those numbers in terms of, as you look at the unemployment rate, are there certain sectors where the job market is really hot right now and certain sectors where maybe it's not doing so well?
Like if we look at our regional economy over here, I would say like still the health sector, is doing fine. But the one area that I feel like our IT sector, like we need to focus more on the technology and also just to look into that what kind of industry we can focus. Like I rather prefer that we should go for a bit of like a diversified economy because we are seeing the same kind of trend. We are not seeing moving away from to an innovative economy. Maybe this is the time to think about what are the areas that we can focus for making that transitional leap towards innovative economy.
And maybe the two of you can weigh in on that too in terms of where you see the job market being right now and going.
Well, in Duluth, for the next 5 years, we have construction with Essentia and St. Luke's, the interstate rebuild. If you're in the trades, you're working. You're guaranteed jobs. And everyone I talk to who's in that industry talks about not being able to get workers. So maybe our educational sector, maybe high school counselors need to refocus where our graduates are going because we're going to need those people. It's not just all nurses. And, we need people who can do heating.
Ron?
I agree, and for young people, if you're not in the trades right now and you're not working, it's really something to aspire to. You can make a good living, get good benefits, and and there's plenty of jobs.
Ron, was 2019 a good year for the mining industry? I believe it settled down a little bit, didn't it, by the end of the year?
It did, but part of that, the numbers are a little bit deceiving because Cleveland Cliffs decided to sit on some of its stockpile because the prices weren't what they should be. So there could have been more movement than there was. But you know, there are indications that the coming year might be a little slower. Automobiles aren't selling at a top rate, and you know, the steel makers are finding there's a little bit of slack in demand for piping due to some of these holdups with pipelines.
Tony, you've been a long-time observer of the mining industry. Do you think that recent investments in the mines have positioned northern Minnesota properties for a good position in the future?
Okay, there's two things going on. We depend on the demand for steel. If the U.S. economy is going to maintain its 2% growth rate, which is fine, it's not great, demand for steel will be the same. Fine, not great. Therefore, the demand for our taconite. Now, what Cliffs has done by trying to diversify the product, that can't hurt. The more you expand your market and potential customers, the better it's going to be. It's not yet a game changer, but it's a step in the right direction.
How does China play out in all of this?
Well, China is still producing about half of the world's steel. They're still producing more than they need. They're still trying to export it. Now, the steel tariffs in this country have protected us to some extent from that, but it's the fundamentals in the steel industry have not changed over the last 5 years. We've been protected by the steel tariffs a bit, but there's still the problem, excess capacity in China.
Ron, what about non-ferrous mining, including the copper-nickel projects at Polymet, Twin Metals? It seems like they keep hitting little roadblocks.
Just saw a presentation from Polymet today at the Maritime Club. It's kind of in a holding pattern, and they acknowledge that part of the process right now is litigation, and that was one of several steps. But litigation does not happen quickly, and it's something that was anticipated. So until courts rule on a number of questions, the companies will work their way through the process. They'll gear up, but I don't think we're going to see any steel coming out of the ground yet at new facilities.
Sakib, northeastern Minnesota, of course, has its strong mining industry. Is there one industry that is driving the economy of northwest Wisconsin?
If we look at the mining industry performance in northwest Wisconsin at the moment, I would say is almost like in that area, if I consider, rather than the mining, I would say the refinery, the Husky refinery and all those, they are having a more inroads in northwest Wisconsin region, compared to if I consider northeast Minnesota region, the Iron Range.
Tourism big?
Tourism, the Bayfield, of course, is summer destination, and now I can hear from the mayor of Superior, and they were all discussing about how to improve the tourism industry, how to attract people in this region, I would say. So this is one of the areas that definitely northwest Wisconsin needs to work on.
The winter's off to a strong start with early snow and lots of it.
Yeah.
Does this bode well for the tourism industry here in
It's
in
ironic,
Minnesota?
after years of having Snowcross be canceled because of the lack of snow, this year it gets canceled because of too much snow.
What irony?
Yeah, and that's a huge hit of money.
It is.
You know, you have to have a lot of skiers to make up for that one event, and I don't know if you can recover between now and the end of March or whenever their season ends.
Tony, what's consumer confidence like right now?
Consumer confidence is high, and household wealth is high, in part because of the stock market that you talked about earlier. And that's one of the keys for 2020. As long as consumers are confident, we spend. And you asked earlier about there's war, there's all this talk, but everyone seems to have become immune to it. maybe 3 years of tweets of just kind of, it now just goes over our heads, and it doesn't seem to affect the mood. We can have a crisis in the Persian Gulf and gas prices don't go up. I mean, who would have thought that? So consumer confidence remains strong, job creation remains strong, income growth remains strong. That's good for the consumer.
How is that in terms of local retail businesses? We're just coming off the holiday season, which traditionally is strong for brick and mortar type businesses, but is the internet really starting to take a hit or place a hit on local businesses?
The internet is strong,
Yeah.
no doubt about that. On our Lake Superior magazine side, our retail was very strong on the internet, and there was good walk-in traffic too. So things are looking good right now, although brick and mortar retail stores do face that strong competition from online.
Are they needing to go online to really make a go of it?
Well, you're starting to see that. I was in Cub Food yesterday, and there are people doing grocery shopping and delivery. Target, you walk into Target, and there's people coming to pick up their orders. So you've seen the brick and mortar companies adjusting and catching up. And it's been a total transformation of retail. But I would say locally, Best Buy seems to have survived. You see Target, and now, man, if the grocery stores are doing delivery.
You're nodding over there. You see that too?
This is interesting trend, and I agree with both Tony and Ron here. This online shopping, how it is changing the landscape of the brick and mortar, retail, and they have to adjust, they have to adapt. And question about that, Best Buy and Target is doing well. Like they have to be innovative with their strategies so that people will go there at least like for, I would say put it like this way, like fun retail. Like go there and having an experience, positive experience. So you might be able to capture those segment of customers coming to the, that area, like Best Buy and Target. Probably they're doing
Well,
that.
the population certainly is changing its buying habits. And speaking of population, are any of you expecting big things in the 2020 census? Do you think we're seeing growth here in this region, or are we stepping back a little bit? Anybody?
That's a great question. I mean, I've lived here 30 years and the population has declined or been stable during that. And it would be great to see growth, because if we can keep our young people in this community, that's future growth. And my impression is we have in the last 10 years, just from students, it's Glasgow sticking around, but I would like to see proof.
What are you expecting, Ron?
I think some of that is tied to the availability of housing, and that's gone up somewhat in multifamily units, not so much in single-family units. The growth, I don't think, will necessarily be in cities like Duluth. It might be on the outskirts.
Are housing starts slow?
New homes have not recovered since 2007.
Really?
It just not the trend anymore. Young people seem to want to be in apartment buildings. Single-family homes are just not coming up the way they used to.
What's the census looking like, do you think, in your neighborhood, Sakib?
It's like same story, like a bit of like slow, the home, new homes and constructions that we see in Superior side and also Northwest Wisconsin. It's a bit of like slow development. It depends on the demand side. If you can attract the young couples, to move to this region, and it's all tied to what kind of jobs we can offer. How we can attract the young generation over here, especially. So that will influence the demographics, the trends, the housing market, and everything.
Of course, one of our favorite parts about having the three of you on is to revisit the predictions that you made last year at this time, talk about those a little bit, and then give you an opportunity to put your hat on and see if you can come up with a prediction for the upcoming year. So why don't we start out by listening to what Ron had to say last year at this time about what we could expect in 2019.
It'll be a hot year for construction in the Duluth area with Essentia and St. Luke's and the new apartment building downtown, and you know, the issue could be the labor shortage.
Well, we've talked about that a little bit. Spot on.
And that will continue, I think, in 2020, the labor shortage, and but I think the strong economy will still continue. Eventually, you know, we're going to catch up with too much government spending and things will change, but, you know, probably that's more in the long term than the short term.
So was that your prediction, or do you have another prediction to make?
No, that's my prediction.
Right. Let's hear what Saqib had to say last year at this time.
The growth will slow down. That's what I'm predicting, and there will be that labor shortage issue. You know, that will be there. Like it will still linger. The inflation depends on the retaliatory tariff effect. If there's a retaliatory tariff, that we might impact the inflation, and we might see at least 2 Fed funds rate hike by the Federal Reserve.
Well, you covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I'm spot on about that. You know, the growth rate, the regional GDP growth rate will slow down a bit. Of course, it's still growing, you know, but not like what we observed initially, that initial effect when there's a tax cut and how the consumer spending went up. Now we are seeing a bit of like that retaliatory tariff effect, a big, seeping in. So we can see that like the growth is happening, but not the way it was, we observed initially. And regarding that inflation, you can see that the central bank actually, there was a lull up to July, month of July last year, and then suddenly they went for 3 rate cuts. So over there, I was predicting that if there is a inflationary pressure, then central bank will go for rate increase. So what I would say that why central bank went for this action, it is a bit of like a taking some preemptive measures against that what is happening with China, the trade war, and what might be the implication on the greater economy. Because if we expect that after a few months or after a year or so, we might see some of the negative effects of this trade war. It's better to take action right now, and that's what the central bank did.
Let's do a quick prediction from you.
I would say that U.S. economy will slow down. There will be growth, but there will be no recession. Okay, it will be growth, but not like the very high growth rate we'll see. And there will be again that low inflation and low interest rate. So maybe central bank, at best, might take only one action here. Like it might, hard to tell whether it will go up or go down, depending on the situation. But I would say I will not be surprised if they don't take any action for the next 7 to 8 months.
All right, let's hear what Tony's prediction was from last year.
All the discussion about a recession's nonsense right now. The economy will slow down, but it'll still be 2.5% growth. I'll agree with the Fed. We'll raise interest rates at most 2 times. At most. And I think a year from now, though, we'll be talking about whether we're starting next 2020 with a recession. Well, 2.3% growth. I'll say 2.5% this year. I think there's going to get a boost from the census because you hire a lot of workers. The resumption of the 737 MAX, which has a huge impact on the economy, and probably some extra government spending going into the election. Trump gets reelected. Republicans control the Senate. 2021, we have a recession.
All right. Well, there you go. You went right into your prediction.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being here. We really enjoy having you here. And
see you next year.
Yeah.
If not before.
My pleasure.
Thank you. time now for the business news from our friends at Business North. There will soon be a change of top leadership at one of Duluth's two publicly traded companies. Iconics Corporation announced that Bill Euland will retire as president and chief executive officer on February 10th. He has held those positions for the past 19 years. He will remain chairman of the board, a post he has held for 43 years. Euland will be succeeded by Glenn Sandgren, who will also serve on the company's board. Sandgren most recently was president of a New York firm that serves the electronics market.
Extending a trend of recent mergers of area legal practices, Cloquet's 47-year-old Rudy law firm became part of the Duluth-based Freiberger law firm on January 1st. Rudy attorneys and staff will continue to operate from offices in Cloquet. Freiberger, Buchanan, Smith & Frederick is northern Minnesota's largest law firm with 25 attorneys. It was founded way back in 1893 and provides a variety of legal services to businesses, corporations, and individuals.
A criminal theft complaint has been filed against a principal in a former Duluth accounting firm. Jesse Fry from the former Eagle Accounting Company was charged with theft by swindle in the amount of $235,000. The St. Louis County Attorney's Office took action after the discovery of irregularities in an audit of Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce financial records. Fry had been hired by the chamber to provide accounting services. Chamber staff members were not involved, the organization said. When the chamber learned of the discrepancies, it notified Duluth Police and discontinued its contract with Eagle Accounting. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
And you can keep up with our latest topics, interviews, and earlier stories by following Almanac North on our social media channels. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And for updates about your favorite PBS programs, visit the WDSC website, where you will also find news about the station and learn about our upcoming public events. And Julie, it seems like 2020 will be an eventful year in the region and across the country.
I think any presidential election year is full of adventure.
Always exciting. For Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.